Nick C. The Sea Org, if I understand correctly, has a system of ranks modeled after the U.S. Navy. In the real-world armed forces, higher rank usually carries certain privileges. For example, commissioned officers may have a separate dining room with better food. On ships, officers may be given private or semi-private cabins, while the rank and file bunks together. In the olden days, officer uniforms were made of better materials than those of common soldiers or sailors. Generals and admirals can have adjutants, essentially uniformed attendants. What privileges, if any, does higher rank carry in the Sea Org? Okay, well, not a lot, but there is some. From my experience in PAC at the Big Blue base, which is where I was stationed for 17 years, or posted, that's where I worked, there were separate tables eventually set up. This wasn't the way it was when I first got there, but they did a pretty massive renovation of the main mess eating area. They, sort of put linoleum floor down and had these nice wooden tables made, or nicer round wooden tables with, on stands that you could easily set up and break down. And we did a lot of those setting up and breaking down when I was on the RPF. I got to learn how to carry those tables by myself. But when they were first in the renovation, it seemed kind of cool. So we get this nice dining area with a nicer, facility and stuff. And the officers then had their own section that they could sit in. And but then they actually set up an officer's mess. And that was where the commanding officers and maybe their spouses and their crew would sit. There was a CMO mess, kind of its own thing, but that was also where the captains would go. So there was like that became like the executive dining room. I think originally it was a CMO only, and then it became like the base executives were over there. And then RTC has its own dining room, completely separate from everybody else. I think INCOM, the computer guys, which is also a high-level sub-organization in the church, I think they also ate in the RTC dining room, because I think theoretically INCOM, the computer subgroup, and RTC are sort of parallel organizations, but of course practically that doesn't really work out that way. Anyway, separate mess. Okay. That's great. There was no change in prices and the canteen, the crew canteen. There wasn't any change or difference in the quality or content of the meals for the officers, for the executives and the crew. They got the same food, but the executives would get it in a much nicer setting and might get, accoutrements like more salt or seasoning and stuff like that might be provided for them. Better desserts, or the fact that they would get dessert, that they would, have a quantity where everybody wasn't like, like they would do in the main mess, right? It became like sort of Lord of the Flies when the cake came out, if we ever had anything like that, which was not often. Ice cream, that's right. It was ice cream on Thursdays or Friday nights or something. So, so things got a little rough and tumble over in the main mess where they wouldn't get that way for the executives. Otherwise, it was really just a matter of rank was something in the Sea Org that was used as an additional bludgeon point. It was an additional way to make you guilty for not having done enough, or not doing enough, or not dealing with your juniors in an appropriate manner to get them to get their stats up. And what kind of officer are you anyway, right? Like, what is this? And it would be featured as a criticism in reports that would be written about you. He's it wouldn't even have to be an officer. You could be a petty officer and have this kind of crap run on you too. Supposedly a chief petty officer, but he can't even get his junior to comply with the simplest of orders. This kind of thing would be even put in writing against you. So it was, I want to say a two-edged sword, but I really feel it's more like there's a great big blade on this side, which is the con of it, and then there's a little tiny, sort of blade on the other side. It's kind of like, well, I get to cut some grapes with it, like it's not really like that great of a wonderful thing to have increased rank in the Sea Org. It doesn't get you more pay either. It's really just sort of a status thing, and that really only applies on Sea Org Day, where everybody gets into their uniform, where you can see quite clearly what their rank is. I mean, they have some rank stuff now that they're using, these little pins, neck pins or lapel pins, but they're not really the same as when you're wearing the full Class A with the braid and the gold and the, what do they call it, the egg salad or whatever, all the all the stuff on the hat and all that. So that's where the pomp and circumstance of the Sea Org exists, is kind of one day out of the year for Sea Org Day, and that's where the officers really kind of shine. Otherwise, it's really no big deal.